chair's going. Hello. Right, so we're going to crack on with another one quickly because I need to get editing and uploading fairly sharpish. So this one I picked up from the post office yesterday. This one and another 9 from a fantastic bloke called Barry Bradford, who I'm going to put a picture of him now. If I can get hold of Barry, I'll ask him for his permission. If not, that's probably a blank space. But hopefully I'll find a decent picture of him. Barry is a lovely bloke who runs the whiskyfiles.com, which is essentially a whiskey tasting stroke review blog. And a good resource if you're into whiskey and various whiskies. He sent me a pack, like I say, I picked it up yesterday from the post office because they wouldn't put it through my front door. 10 samples in there. Unfortunately, one of them I've already had, so I've had to put that aside maybe for later on. But some absolute crackers in there, some really unusual stuff in there as well, which is helps towards the total number. It's another 9 off my extra 100 that I need to get, and there's some really unusual ones in there, including this one, which I have never ever heard of, and yet in 2014 was the 9th biggest selling Scotch whisky brand in the world. There we go. So Label 5 is owned by a French company called La Martiniquaise. I think that's how you pronounce it. La Martiniquaise. There's like an I in there that just really kind of throws the pronunciation. Which by the sounds of it is a fairly big drinks company, but predominantly in France. Like I say, this was the 9th biggest selling Scotch brand in the world, and yet I've never heard of it, and I've never ever seen it in the UK ever. Its biggest market is in France, but apparently it's available in 100 countries. So I'm guessing like mainland Europe is the core kind of France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, that kind of area, and then spreading around a bit, probably a bit in Asia as well. They do a standard version called the Classic Black, but this is the 12-year-old, which looks like this. In terms of the price, I couldn't even find anywhere in the UK that was selling it. Like Master and Malt don't list it, Whisky Exchange don't list it. Apparently the Classic Black is 15 to 20 euros, so it's on the kind of the cheaper side of the blends. I'm guessing this being a 12-year-old age statement, probably a little bit more, 25, 30 euros, but I'm guessing. If anybody knows out there how much it is, if anybody knows if you can actually get it in the UK, do add some comments because it would be great to get a bit more information. La Martiniquaise actually owned the Glenmorangie distillery, which is in Elgin, which I was convinced were owned at one point by the same company that did Glenmorangie, but I'm probably completely wrong on that. So Glenmorangie is a large part of this blend. Now, it's actually blended and bottled in Livingston, West Lothian, which is here, which is just down the MA west of Edinburgh, and apparently, as I've just found out on Facebook, is about 10 minutes from where Kirsty and Stuart at the Whisky Corner live. So I'm hoping that they've come across this at some point, because it sounds like it is just on their doorstep. So I'm trying not to spill it. And let's get it in the glass. It's 40%. Let's get it in a glass and let's see what it's like. So blended whiskey, so blend of malt whiskey and grain. Apparently Glenmorangie is the main kind of component of it, but I'm sure that's not the only one. And grain whiskies as well. Now could be from Cameron Bridge, because that's only over the Firth, so it could be that they're getting stock from there, or maybe from Girvan. Now, there is a graininess in there, but this doesn't smell like what I personally kind of consider like a cheap blend smell. And with all due respect to something like that Norval Sensible, on the cheaper end of the blends, I always get this, particularly on the nose as well, there's like a plasticky artificial edge that just doesn't quite work for me, and it's always noticeable on the cheaper end of blends. And I don't know whether it's excessive colouring that they're using, because this is, I'd consider like a classical whiskey colour. So it is entirely possible, probably likely, that colouring's been added to it, although not being able to see the bottle I can't say for certain. but it's like an artificial flavouring and a nose that I always associate with slightly excessive colouring and just like a bad combination, and it's almost like there's too much grain in it and it's not particularly well made. And it's just a nose and a palate that I always associate with like very cheap blends or just very poorly made whiskey in general. Now this doesn't have it. This is actually, it's got the edge, it's got the slightly metallic edge of the grain in a blend, but it's not artificial, it's not plasticky, like almost like a burnt plastic type feel. And there's quite a nice maltiness on it. There's not a lot, if anything. And dare I say it, we're talking Hague Club levels of not a lot. It is very, 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 very smooth, to the point where there's bugger all on the palate. I'm trying to give it a chance to try and show me something, and there's not a great deal. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing in terms of it is very, very easy to drink, but it is kind of a bad thing because there's nothing to it. It's not giving you anything, it's just kind of in your mouth and gone. If you want to drink a whiskey to get drunk, then this would do the trick, because it's not going to give you any burn, it's not going to give you any flavour. You can just get it on your neck and then you can feel like absolute shit in the morning, and you can have a hangover and just generally be an idiot. But if you're looking for just a whiskey to kind of give you some flavour and give you some enjoyment, there's really nothing to this at all. There is still slightly more than Hague Club, but not a lot. There's a slight maltiness, there's a slight sweetness. To be honest, there's not even a great deal of kind of the grain punchiness that you get from a lot of blended whiskies. There's just not a lot of anything. Now I'd be interested to see what the classic black's like, whether that being younger whiskies in there's got a bit more oomph to it. There's the tiniest bit of oakiness, the tiniest bit of maltiness, the tiniest bit of sweetness, but there's nothing, really. Yeah, I don't really know what to say about that, because it's not telling me anything at all. Yeah, nothing whatsoever. However, unless they're charging 45 quid a bottle for this, which I doubt somehow, and it's not in a big blue fancy bottle. If this is like 20 quid for a age statement blend, you can't really complain. But there's a lot more interesting whiskies for about 20 quid. If this was the classic black at like 15 euros, so well, it's not 10 quid, call it 11, 12 quid, I'd say actually that's quite good value for money, because 11, 12 quid for a whiskey that has got nothing offensive about it whatsoever is actually really good value for money. The fact that this is the 12-year-old and therefore probably has a bit more of a premium price on it, maybe not excessively so, but it's probably more expensive than the classic black, makes me think it's maybe slightly pushing it a little bit. But we'll see. If the classic black tastes like that, which is not a lot, but it's like 12 quid's worth, then bargain. But if you're looking at maybe 20 quid for that, there is arguably much more interesting whiskies for 20 quid. But I would never have come across that in my life, probably, if it wasn't for Barry sending it. So it's great to come across it, and I can't not recommend it, because if you were given that, you would drink it, there wouldn't be anything to offend you, and you could quite easily just drink it in terms of, do you know what, I want a whiskey, or I'm going to put a shot of whiskey in my coffee or something like that, as a kind of like not cooking whiskey, because it doesn't have enough oomph to kind of use in cocktails. But if you're wanting to kind of just put some in some coffee, or give it to somebody and you didn't really want to give them any of your good stuff, you could give them that and it will be absolutely fine. So there's nothing offensive about it. There's just nothing particularly good, interesting about it. But Barry, thank you for that. I almost feel sorry that that's actually the first one that I've had, because I'm fairly confident that the rest you've sent me are probably a lot more interesting and better than that. So I don't want everybody else to think that you've just sent me a load of dross. But yes, it was fascinating. And if Kirsty and Stuart at the Whisky Corner do live 10 miles away, might not be worth taking the trip now to see if you can snaff some bottles of it. Maybe see what the class is that time. Maybe that's some good one. Right, that's that done. I need to do editing and upload of my previous whiskey, so I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.